Three, two, one. Welcome to Elevating the Genre podcast number 1. Very excited to have you, whether you are watching us or listening to us. We are your co-hosts. I'm Christopher Morrison, and that is...
Dominic. Hi, Dominic Ma.
Dominic Ma on the other end. See, we're working on cues and stuff. We're awesome. There is an episode 0 if you want to learn a little bit more specifically about who we are. As well as a little bit sort of how this podcast is going to run. Go check that out. That is on iTunes and on wherever you found us, obviously, and on the old YouTubes as well. So that'll give you a little bit of a backstory about Dominic and I and our relationship and sort of why we're doing this and how we're approaching it. So that's all there. So we don't have to worry about that this time. But this time, episode 1, for Elevating the Genre, we are going to focus on Chris Claremont's run on the Uncanny X-Men from 1975 to 1991, and just sort of talk about sort of its influences, what it did, if it did anything, what it did for me, what it did or didn't do for Dom, and all that kind of stuff. But before we get to that, I want to introduce our very first segment. We have segments. I'm very excited about segments, which is what I'm calling What's Elevating Our Genre, where Dom and I are just going to throw out some generic love to whatever happens to be what we think is cool and going on in the geek world right now that's not necessarily being created by him or I. Dom, I'll let you throw down first. Let's do it for our inaugural episode.
Thanks. And I'll just say real quick, if when I shift out of frame, it's either to look at my stupid computer where stuff related to this is happening on the internet.
Got it.
Or to reach over and get my coffee. See, you can't see it, but there's a gigantic wall of just coffee and snacks here. It's just a constantly replenishing wall. I just have to lean over to get it. So bear with me. That's what I'm doing if I move back and forth.
You have some kind of weird Harry Potter wall. I don't know. That feels like something out of Harry Potter. A replenishing wall of coffee and snacks. Yeah.
Right. Like Harry Potter after he discovers coffee. Right. Like that's. It's also why we live in Berkeley, it's just a standard feature in our, bougie Berkeley lifestyle. Anyway, so that's wall coffee.
Yeah.
What's elevating our genre today? Well, I think it's this Joss Whedon video that just came out.
Oh.
He's starting a thing. I believe it's a form of super PAC. It is super. Ooh. And the premise of which is save the day, and the video he's dropped, which I assume we're going to link to somehow, is
I'll link to it
has just a whole bunch of really popular, beautiful actor people doing a PSA, and the essential thrust of it is to register to vote and to vote to beat Donald Trump, whatever that takes.
And boom, elevating the genre goes political right away. Awesome, love it.
Right. Well, I mean, it just happened to come out today, and it's very timely. And also, I think we've seen a lot of PSAs, but this one's actually very funny and entertaining. So if you're a Whedon fan of his brand of snark speak, which I am, you'll actually enjoy watching this PSA. It's not just preachy, and it's also got a ton of the Avengers actors in it, and so there's subtext. Very simply, is let's be superheroes and deal with a real world threat, which responds to or resonates with my particular thing. So I just think, as far as we're talking about elevating a genre, we're using the recognition of popular actors / popular superheroes, take it into the real world a little bit. What's the real evil that we face? And that's boiling down a lot. Like, I voted for Nader once. I know it's a huge problematic issue, but I think boiling it down to just like basic superhero logic, what we do is gather all the Avengers and all the Buffy verse heroes
Right.
and team up and just beat the crap out of Trump by whatever means necessary, right?
Right.
Sometimes you have to make a deal with the devil to defeat Thanos or whatever. That's not the greatest example, but you know what I'm saying? It's in crude superhero logic, it makes sense to me.
Yes.
I don't know where you stand on that whole one. I know it's a very thorny issue.
Of course, I'm. Well, not of course, but I mean, I don't know. I'm all for it. I'm certainly all for anybody using their power for what I would consider to be good. And just getting people to register to vote is certainly good. And in this case, again, I have no problems wearing my insane leftiness on my sleeve, and I'm sometimes far to the left of a lot of people that I know. And even in this situation, I haven't start trying to get super personal. I haven't voted popular two parties since my first election in 1990, when I think I voted for Bill Clinton's. When I voted for Bill Clinton in the first election. Ever since then, I've been voting third party for a variety of reasons, of which I won't get into. But this time, I won't be. I really won't be. I'll be voting for fucking Hillary Clinton for a variety of reasons. And I say fucking Hillary Clinton not because I believe she's what everybody says she is. Just because fucking I have to vote in the stupid two-party system that I really strongly don't believe in. Just because I won't be able to sleep at night, even if she wins without my vote. So yeah, whatever. So like I said, shock surprise, we got super political, but again, I think you're right. I think it fits into what we talk about all the time about genre is in such a powerful place in society right now that you literally have actors who are up there who are famous for doing genre work, really making a push and something that can really have an impact on either younger voters or whatever. So that's cool, man. Talk about elevating the genre to a fucking political level, right? And I think it's great. Yeah, I think it's fabulous. Nothing.
And also, I'll just note to get back to our essential topic. As far as I can tell, there are no X-Men actors in it, so it's even universe consistent within this little PSA. It's got Avengers and like some Whedon-y people.
And that's that. Which
the X-Men were not.
Yeah, so just to remind the audience, however, Whedon did play in the X-Men sandbox, comic book wise, and the rumors are that. That he did a rewrite on or did a full draft of the first X-Men movie supposedly, and again the story is that the only line that survived from his draft of the X-Men is the "you're a dick" moment apparently from Wolverine to Cyclops, but who knows? But yes, but it is internally consistent. He didn't touch those films. So that's cool. So that's what's elevating Dom's genre. What's elevating my genre is, I guess I have a visual aid. I guess I can use it. It's this lovely little piece of work called Black Sad, which is a comic book, and it came out of Spain, but it's in the U.S. I think Dark Horse Comics put it out in the United States. This is my French version because I'm struggling to learn French sitting here in my Brussels, Belgium world, and it's pretty amazing. It's the creator's name is Diaz Canales, and it's drawn by a dude with one name, always a good sign. Guarnido. Someone tell me if I'm doing that horribly wrong. And it's a little bit.
That sounds neato.
Yes, right. It's a little bit of a retread. It's in terms of like if you're sick of like people using animals, anthropomorphizing animals to the point where they wear suits and they run around and they have jobs. But what's really elevating about it for me is that the artwork is just redonkulous. It's so good. This artist is really something special. And he's, and again, the writer is doing a very strict film noir inside the comic book form with animals as main characters. And I think that wouldn't have gotten my attention except for the artwork. The artwork is just out of this crazy good. So I highly recommend it. And I can't recommend the story yet because I'm learning French and reading it in French, and I'm not even through the first volume. So there's like 6 volumes. But I trust my wife, who is
it might be a wonderful story, or it might be in like baby French.
Yes, no,
Okay,
it's
great.
definitely not in baby French. It's in full blown film noir French, which makes it impossible for me to read. But I'm trying.
Oh, okay.
I use it for French. I'm trying. It's helping. But yeah, the artwork's fabulous. Anyway, Black Sad, check it out if you can find it. It's kick ass. And like I said, I think in the States it's available from Dark Horse Comics, and I think they've got all. I think they've got everything up to the date, and I believe the creator is still writing it. So, and they're also self-contained little stories. They're not. It's not like a continuous arc. So, anyway, that's what's elevating my genre.
By the way, quick note on that.
What was that?
Oh, just a quick note on that. Shout out to Stuart Ing Books. Have you heard of that? He's my cousin, Stuart Ing, NG, Stuart Ing Books, and he specializes in European imported graphic novels of that type that most people have not heard of, the kind that you have direct access to because you're in Europe. But anyway, but he's well known for that, and
Cool.
that's the place I would look up that some versions of that book.
Cool.
So anyway, we'll just a note that we'll talk about that later, just because it's a
Great.
good
Yeah, no,
place for,
definitely. And I'll link. Yeah, I assume he's got a site somewhere that we'll link to as well. That's badass. Yeah. No.
cool.
That is. It is. It's a good thing that my French isn't so good, because literally walking into a bande dessinée store out here, a magasin, it's the content is so rich over here. It's insane. It's just it's everywhere. The comic, the comics, and obviously the comics medium is a little different out here. It's a hardback medium, number one, which is what's crazy.
Yeah.
There's no ads.
Nice. Those hardcovers, they're nice.
Yeah, man, and the subject matter ranges literally everything from like historical, like vaguely educational shit, to like weird, stupid retellings of Dracula, to like Elric of Melniboné adaptations, to like this freaking crazy, cat as a private investigator, to it's all gorgeous. It's presented. It's a wonderland, and and I'm so glad my French is coming so slowly, because I would literally be fucking flat broke, because I just buy everything in the universe. It's such an interesting, different world. So it's great that we can point people to another resource. Cool.
Might have a cool.
Cool. All right. So let's jump in, shall we? Here, we've got going today again is what we're going to talk about is a little Chris Claremont action. And when I brought this up to Dom last week, Dom, I think might be on the other side of the fence a little bit more, from my personal opinion, because I won't bury the lead here. For me, this is one of the core genre elements of my whole freaking upbringing. My room was a shrine to not just Wolverine was a standout for me, of course, but to the whole run, to Claremont's run and take on these characters for me. It was Star Wars was there, and then right next to it was Claremont's X-Men, Claremont's Uncanny X-Men, to the point where I formed a lot of my morality out of these stories, and just so we can sort of set the stage to remind people what we're talking about here. We're also talking about a rather impressive achievement in comics in a time where people were hopping on and off books, and X-Men, nobody remembers this, but the X-Men at the time in 1975 was a fourth tier comic. These were sort of Fantastic Four rejects, right? Like they were just sort of it was just another book for Marvel when Chris jumped on it. Chris, like, he's a buddy of mine. When Claremont jumped on it.
Well,
he's got my name.
there's two Chris's in the world.
Yeah, we could do that. Yes, right. So, and he jumped on, obviously, most people know, on episode 94, on issue 94, and his run ran unbroken, man, from 94 to 279, and he oversaw the expansion of the X books into the New Mutants, into all of the limited series that were out, that came out. The Wolverine limited series was written by him, the Kitty Pryde and Wolverine limited series, a couple of others that I'm blanking on right now, I think. What most people don't realize, and I keep forgetting, is that he did not actually start. He didn't collect these characters together. He didn't write Giant-Sized X-Men #1. That was Len Wein. Len Wein, I believe is how you pronounce that name, actually. So, to get on that book and to have such a unbroken run, and then to have a 15-year run like that, and then to make it literally into a juggernaut and into see what I did there, and and into basically the best-selling book of for almost 2 decades.
Literally became an unstoppable juggernaut. That Claremont X-Men.
Yes. So it's very impressive. Interesting read.
Yeah, and I'd also like to help contextualize, for our non-comic reading listeners. For example, for when X-Men finally came about to being a film series, that was Claremont's X-Men they started with. I mean, very much so, right? I mean, it was not the original X-Men, who I'm wearing a shirt of the original X-Men as pandas, which is a thing I'll talk about at length later. If you want, there's Angel Panda, Beast Panda, Ice Panda, Marvel Panda, Cyclops Panda, all that.
Oh,
but the point is, those are the original X-Men. And, you're with me on this one, right? They were not where they started the movie. Right. They brought in the X-Men from the Claremont era, not characters he created. That's a whole other story, but Storm, Wolverine, and so that's the iconic team for a lot of people. Right. So when you think of X-Men, we're thinking of stuff that was crafted in that era. Anyway, I think that's worth mentioning just because it's
And to piggyback on that point, really the only thing that is quote unquote iconic about the X-Men that he didn't create, at least in the early days. I mean, now we'll talk about my journey with sort of what happened after Claremont left the books, but from that era is like he basically just didn't create the X-Men, the base team, Professor Xavier, and Magneto, and the Sentinels. Like everything else came out of that dude's brain, pretty much. Which is it's just a bit astounding considering how sprawling this 15-year run ended up being as well, and how many characters he introduced, and how many plot lines that we just, again, I think, for the non-comics reading audience, if you're not aware, every single X-Men movie has been at least influenced by that story that he created, or a character that he created, so far, at least so far. And I think pretty soon they might they might stretch that a little bit, but still, it's a thing, man. So I'll talk about what I think. It's a thing.
Chris, you're in struggling to convey adequate reverence mode.
I am a little bit. I'm also trying to not
Does
gush
that make
or
sense?
repeat. Yes, absolutely. I'm also trying not to gush and or repeat myself too much as I'm getting used to this podcasting thing. And I talk too much in general. So there you go.
It's perfectly all right. It's perfectly all right.
So
yeah, okay. We're gonna work it out, people. We both have a lot to say.
Yes,
We're gonna try not to say it simultaneously because we don't have the mutant power where you can decipher our voices when they're gabbing over each other. Anyway,
precisely. So let me throw out a couple ideas about what I think made his run good, and we can kick them around. I mean, number one, I think that everybody always points to is we'll start with sort of relationships, right? He brings a certain type of relationship to a comic book, particularly a superhero comic book that maybe hadn't been there as much before. I mean, I think before you have Stan Lee and forgive me, I believe it's Kirby doing the Fantastic Four, which is really exploring a familial relationship. And they do a pretty they do a bang up job of that, and that's great. But Claremont comes along and not only has sort of there's technically no parent, but there is, like, Xavier is a parent to these kids. Most of them are kids except for Wolverine, right? At least that's what we're pitched as Maz, at least. And again, we're talking about the Storm, the Colossus, Nightcrawler, Cyclops, Kitty Pryde, Wolverine sort of era team here, roughly, with a couple of other people tossed in and out.
I think of Cyclops as sort of a bitter step parent in that scenario too, but that's a point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, hell, I mean, we're going outside the main run of the books, but you read Kitty Pryde and Wolverine, and that's Wolverine literally becoming Kitty Pryde's parent, right? I mean, there's no doubt about that. And then when that run ends and that relationship continues in the main line of the books, for sure. So much so that when Kitty Pryde leaves to go do Excalibur, Claremont insists on injecting that relationship again with Jubilee, right? When she shows up, he tries to basically reform that relationship. So they have a parental thing, but it's also, what's cool about that is that it's not blood related, right? There's this weird adoption, for me, this weird sort of adoption overtone So he's got that, and then he's got, of course, we've got the love relationship between Scott and Jean, which obviously wasn't his creation, but was playing with, and then love relationships span all over the book. People fall in and out of love, particularly with Storm and Forge. Was probably one of the first sort of adult relationships in a comic book that I really was like shipping for a little bit. You know, I was behind that a lot. And then, of course, most importantly, he injects fucking dysfunction, right? Like massive dysfunctional relationships in a lot of different levels, which is what's cool. So, I don't know, anything to add to that?
Where to start? Oh, there are just so many stories.
Yeah, man.
I guess I wanted speaking to the family point, and you know, the dramatic or structural models that give comic books their strength. Yeah, Fantastic Four, a literal family. What was cool? One thing that's cool about the X-Men and this recurring trope, especially in the Claremont era, is they're just like assembling people out of nowhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they don't like they have a tribe, and like how do they come together? They're just like, there's a mutant, let's go meet that mutant, and maybe they'll become an X-Men. You know, that doesn't work in real life, right? You know, like
Right.
like scour the globe for friends by going, hey, you have a genetic anomaly like mine? Let's just meet up, and all of a sudden maybe we'll be a family. So that one thing that just speaks to is, and again, Claremont didn't write that giant size, but the model keeps coming up.
Right.
Professor X just goes around and assembles an incredibly diverse team.
Right.
And, you know, diverse is a loaded word, but we're using it here in the real, like, global sense.
Right.
People from Japan, people from Africa, people from Germany, people who have no reason really to be together except for this one mission, and they're all mutants. And they become this incredibly layered family because of that. And to me, that elevated the hell out of the concept of the X-Men.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's also stunning.
And then when they didn't have enough people, they turned one into an Asian person. But I'm going to come to that in a little bit.
That's true. That's right. Oh, good. I'd love to hear your perspective on that. And for the again, won't bury the lead there. Obviously, he's talking. Dom was talking about Psylocke a little bit. But yeah, no, it's and I guess that was really important. I was lucky enough to grow up in a community in a place called Montgomery County, Maryland, that happened to have I went to a high school that was pretty damn diverse, and it was really great to have one of my core stories reflect that, right? Like, I literally took Russian in my high school because, you know, I'm an asshole. And you know, I was
because you wanted to talk to Colossus.
Exactly. I felt like I already knew some. Boy, shamoy. Anyway, Katya. Anyway, yeah, I had.
Did you see that one where Magic fights Black Widow and they're talking in Russian? By the way, just.
Oh my God! When the hell was that? No.
It was part of Avengers versus X-Men in the comics. It's just a good moment.
Nice. Okay.
Black Widow fighting Colossus' sister, and they start talking shit about each other in Russian.
That's fucking badass.
And somehow Black Widow wins too, I think, which is
okay.
Crazy. But anyway,
that's a little crazy.
Sorry, continue.
All right. Yeah, and it was just for some reason the X-Men felt not just it felt grounded not just in reality, it felt grounded in my reality. And it's funny that you mentioned sort of like going around the globe and pulling these people and becoming a tribe, because that would become I think a lot of early geeks, when we, you know, again, without this wacky, wonderful internet, and it's a bit easier to find your niche, and it's a bit easier to curate your own entertainment so easily now, and you know, whatever, and find people. You know, I don't know if you remember, we had to go around like throwing out shitty quotes to even find out if people knew what the fuck we were talking about. You know, like, you know, for me, like, you know, some people, there's a little sidebar here, but some people question like, well, why don't people throw out, you know, have those little quote wars? And I feel like it was just, that was trolling for who the fuck knew what you were talking about. And you're like, Okay, right? You can quote that stupid Monty Python quote back to me, or you you know, I'm the best there is at what I do, right? And right or whatever, and you toss that shit out, and someone responds right back, and you're like, okay, tribe, all right, at least there's some place to start from. And that felt very real to me, and I felt very much like, yeah, I'd never made the connection though to Xavier running around or the X-Men running around the globe, finding a mutant and being like, hey, you're this thing, come here and let's be a tribe. No, that's great.
It's a little bit nutty, but it's part of the X-Men model, and it happens time and again.
Absolutely.
It even happens in the films.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And what else was I gonna say about that? Yeah, I just when you said that, I reemphasize against this is part of geek psychology. You know, a sense of belonging happens when you're part of this story. Definitely, I can't remember right now, but surely when I was reading those Claremont X-Men, there was something reaching out and reaching back of, you know, you felt like you belonged with these people somehow, you know, and you would grow up with them, and you are that undiscovered mutant or something, you know, and that's elementary, but it's part of why we love this stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, and the fact that Claremont was smart enough to make it about belonging and making it about outsiders as well, right? Like, especially at the time when, you know, he's getting involved in comics when they're a bit of a dismissed medium, to make the whole point, like, people that love and, you know, that fear and hate, you know, they're out to save people who fear and hate them, right? And to really just, and this takes us into my next thing, which is the fucking just inescapable, hit you over the head, but yet still completely and utterly functional metaphor that is the mutant storyline in Marvel Comics in general, and as particularly spelled out in the X-Men, is stellar. And really, for me, set the bar for just reading comics in general. I mean, right, look, I'm going to say some I don't know, possibly heinous things to people. Like, I can't get into Superman. I just can't. Like, I just don't get it. Like, the metaphor, there's not enough of a metaphor there. And if the metaphor is he's fucking Jesus, then I'm really done. Like, I just can't. I just can't get behind it. It's too... And the X-Men, I'm sure it's the X-Men that ruined that for me. Although I was never, even before... I mean, I didn't really find the X-Men until... God, I was already gaming.
Superman gets more interesting when...
You accept that he's Jewish, and it's coming from that perspective. But that's a very adult understanding.
That is a very adult understanding, yes. No, yes, absolutely. When you...
But I completely pick up on what you're saying about, in general, not Superman.
Yeah, right. Just in general, just and it completely, the idea that the story itself is a metaphor, has a central tenet, has a central tentpole metaphor to it, really affects my choice in books from there on out, in comics there on out. I like things that are, I end up liking things in my life that operate and infects my creations. For my own creations, I insist that stuff that I create try to operate on two levels, at least. 2 levels, you know, there has to be a kick-ass story, but in the middle of it, it has to have something to fucking say. It has to be a metaphor to reach out into the world and affect the world around it. Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that the X-Men taught that to me, that Chris Claremont's run on the X-Men taught that to me, as a budding young storyteller myself.
It shows because we're friends. It just happens just like that. Right? I scoped you as an X-Men person quickly way back when, and I'm sure you did the same at some point. And
absolutely.
So it goes. One thing I would like to say is we love Marvel. I mean, we talk a lot of crap about it. We're going to problematize a lot of things they do, but at base, you know, we freaking love Marvel. So you know, we're not in this to like tear down the bad and good things that Marvel has done. We're just here to talk about them. I think we could say we literally love Marvel through richer and poorer, both when they were richer and poorer and when we've been richer and poorer. So that said, I just wanted to get that out there because so then they made all these X-Men movies, and maybe if we can get a little dialectic here going, I don't like almost any of the X-Men movies,
Yeah.
even though they were based on the Claremont run.
Yeah.
And the thing that you were talking about, the really elevating the genre aspect, perhaps the social justice and ethnic minority metaphor, they're going for it. They're definitely going for it. I don't think they ever got it, and that's disappointing to me as a fan.
I mean,
yeah. As we keep this going, I'd like to talk about how like they do and don't get it in comics versus the film versions as an instructive thing. I'm gonna sum up those 2 points. We love Marvel. X-Men movies suck, though. Why?
I have a theory. This is what, and I've had to think of. I've thought about it since the very first time the first movie came out, where I was thrilled yet apprehensive. And the main problem for me is where they fuck it all up is they make Wolverine the main character. And when you do that, a couple of things from the story perspective, I think, fall apart massively. Number one, you're taking the stranger archetype and making him the main character, so now you have to spend too much time with the stranger, and you learn too much about him too fast, and he stops being the stranger, and now you've got nothing. The reason Wolverine organically became what Wolverine became in the comics is because that's a motherfucking 10, 12 year slow burn that eventually, whether you agree or disagree, whether it pays off when they started to deal with it or dick with it, I don't know. But when Wolverine the limited series dropped, it was like, okay, fine, you'd earn the time to spend with this guy. And I think Claremont and particularly John Byrne's rendering of him, and then eventually, obviously, that was handed off to Frank Miller, who is massively problematic. But his work on that is beyond amazeballs. They'd earned learning about this character finally, right? They'd earned it. With the movies, we get a half an hour of him being the stranger, and then all of a sudden he's dad, and it's a nightmare. Right. It's a complete and utter nightmare, and it doesn't fucking work. And they at the same time, by doing that, you completely displace Cyclops' journey completely, and then they just weren't smart enough to come up with a different storyline, and so they just evaporate him in one scene, or whatever. I can't even remember if that's X2 or X3 or whatever, but I mean, it was such a dismissal of a character, because you could feel them being like, we don't know what to do with this guy. It's because you put Wolverine as the leader of the X-Men, and that fucks everything up. And it also, I don't know, in my opinion, it wrecks the metaphor. You now have the attractive white guy leading the group. At least with Cyclops, he's a fucked up one-eyed dude that you sort of is ambiguous, and he's weird, and he's not whatever. He's not the bad. He's a badass in his own right, but it crowds out the ability for the other characters that are differently abled or of different races or whatever to take center stage enough for me. And it just, like I said, I think it goes a long way to wrecking the family vibe and the metaphor of that's at the center of it. I don't know. That was always what I fell back on as to why the movies never passed the smell test for me.
Yeah.
You?
I think that's most of it, and if I would add to that, and I don't want to take away from Wolverine in the films, because Hugh Jackman is doing great work on that. I mean, I think to me, I think he rose naturally because of the rules of Hollywood. He was the breakout star.
Right.
He was doing it. To me, he was doing the most committed acting work. I believe he is that guy most of the time. True. But so. And in getting back to the way that the movies don't work and the Claremont comics do work, once you have Wolverine as the alpha guy, that's a little too obvious, and it doesn't honor these stories in which women or people of color really took the lead in a lot of the Claremont X-Men narratives. For example, like... the whole run where, Kitty Pryde arrives at the X-Men, a story which they a role which they kind of gave to Rogue in that first one. Right. Halfway, they were mainly Wolverine. They sort of had Rogue as that entry point, and that would have been cool. That was also taken directly from that Claremont issue where Rogue just shows up the X-Men mansion. They're like, "Hey, you're evil, but now you're our friend." But anyway,
Yes.
right. So I mean, it goes on and on. They somehow, I'm not going to name names of the filmmaking people, but the people who made the X-Men movies didn't put a lot of work into form. Sort of phoned in our entry point with Rogue. Forgot about Kitty Pryde. They had another chance with Jubilee, and they decided to skip that chance again.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? They give us all these people had like core entry points into the X-Men stories, which made them really interesting. Like, you're joining this family. How is that even possible? There's a guy who is a mass murderer over there with claws coming out of his fist. And you're just going to join up with that guy? You're like a 90-pound Asian girl. And that's what made... And those stories are awesome. If they had been bold, they could have made it about those stories. But I think they played it safe.
Right.
And they like actors who look a certain way. And we'll get into that if we have time.
Yeah, and I think I think that's a great point. It's like they played it safe. That's the other thing that the X-Men comics every month felt dangerous. Even when you get a story like 186, like Life Death, like, which is just Storm and Forge making dinner and forming a relationship. It was I'm getting goosebumps. It was risky. It was something that was they took a departure. Like, Claremont was always taking a certain kind of risk, whether that was a storytelling risk or pushing a character in to a new place, or taking bouncing the story in that, as far outer space as possible, and in the next fucking issue, you've got a weird little like Sentinel story or whatever. There was a danger that one of these characters was gonna get popped after Dark Phoenix, of course. One of these characters is gonna get popped, and you're gonna lose a friend. And that it was gonna fucking matter. Like, that's what the best part about this other thing. That it was gonna affect all the other characters around it. Like, the violence, again, of course, it's comic books, so there's a lot, whatever, say what you want. There's maybe too much fighting or whatever the fight, but most of the time,
I mean, it's become ridiculous.
I'm sorry, say that again. I lost that.
It's become ridiculous at this point in whatever our post 9/11 existence, all the ultra violence and the back to life. Sorry, I think I snorted something on my nose.
No worries. But yeah, no, and so
but yes, I really like it did matter, and I want to talk about the Mutant Massacre when we can.
Yeah, let's fucking jump right into that shit, because that shit wrecked me.
Were you finishing up your segment there?
No, that's fine. Let's jump over to that.
I'm really glad you mentioned Life Death too, because that was ahead of its time, because now look at comics now, and they're all decompressed storytelling like that. They're all like heroes making dinner for 20 pages and then they fight for 2, right?
Right.
So that was really ahead of its time. It was bold. And the art was beautiful. My God.
Yes,
best just 2 people hanging out on a rock art you've ever seen. Barry Windsor Smith. A master. Anyway, Life Death.
Life Death. Also, yeah, check it out.
Okay. Yeah.
I just want to say the color scheme. For Life Death. I want to say the colors. I want to jump in on just real quick and finish off with Life Death. You've got to check out the color scheme in Life Death. It's this pink rose amazeballs. And again, I'm a fucking, 14 or 15-year-old, maniac. And that issue just slowed me down and just made me appreciate things on such a great level. Okay, sorry. Over to you, Don. Go.
Yeah. But as far as A, elevating a genre, and B, wrecking a teenage comic book reader, there was this thing called the Mutant Massacre storyline, which, again, okay, I won't bury the lead this time. It was a metaphor for the Jewish Holocaust, let's just say, or it could be. It was a metaphor for any mass extermination.
Right.
Because basically, all right, at some point under New York City, there's a subculture of mutants who aren't X-Men, and they're kind of living on the fringes. They're called the Morlocks, based after H.G. Wells story. I don't know, based off on something. Led by Callisto. They're the fringe street punk mutants, and there are a lot of them. And at one point, kind of out of the blue, this death squad called the Marauders just starts up and starts killing all of them, and it's fucked up. Chris, be with me here. It was fucked up.
It was.
And the X-Men go in to try to do their thing, and they take massive hits. They take massive casualties. The X-Men get fucked up in a way we probably hadn't seen before, except Wolverine, who heals every time he gets fucked up.
Right.
And we were like, what the hell? And it resonated in so many ways. I mean, again, an ethnic minority being cleansed by a very overpowered death squad. They were also mutants, the Marauders, they had powers, but also they just used guns to shoot people.
Yep. Yeah, and we had.
I'm not surprised that they didn't do a movie of this one, but you know, it's the one we're kind of secretly hoping for.
A little bit, man. That would be. I would. Part of me would love it. And the other thing you have to also, for people maybe who haven't read that run, is that the Morlocks don't come out of nowhere. They're just not like dropped in the first issue of the Mutant Massacre. Oro has this huge relationship with the Morlocks. Actually becomes the leader of the Morlocks for a while. Presaging, and again, Claremont being a genius, presaging the fight she's going to have with Cyclops later to take over the X-Men. She has a similar fight with Callisto to actually lead the Morlocks and to sort of chill out Callisto, because Callisto starts off a little bit as sort of, I don't know what I'm going to call her, a radicalized mutant. She wants to be more aggressive with the quote-unquote above-ground world, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, this is, and the idea that Claremont's a genius, taking the sort of the Professor X Magneto relationship and then putting it in the mouths of Oro and Callisto a little bit. Two women. Callisto to me always looked a little Latina to me. I don't know. It's never really. I don't know what her last name is. I don't know.
Yeah.
Her fucking first name's Callisto. She's not average. Whatever. You know, that was also a stroke of genius. So we had spent time with the Morlocks a lot, and then. It's like 20 issues later, he drops the Marauders in the fucking tunnels and like fucking just exterminates massive amounts of them. And then, as you said, the X-Men. Then the X-Men go in and take. Won't spoil everything if you haven't read it, but it takes pretty brutal hits that resonate for, again, issues and issues and issues later.
I think we can go there. I think it's worth calling the Morlocks a stand-in for the radical anarchist sort of feeling. You know, they're like, the X-Men are not radical anarchists. They're kind of anarchic, but they have a mansion, and the Morlocks are living under tunnels and just sort of waiting for that right time.
Yeah, definitely.
And someone decided to fucking axe all of them. So, I mean, that's another real-world dynamic that is in play. We're not calling the Morlocks right or wrong. No. We are saying that someone had it in for them. Anyway, I've only got this Morlocks into the movie. Anyway, sorry.
Well, you know, it's because
what were we talking about?
The people who unleashed the dude who unleashes the Marauders just got introduced. So we'll see what happens. I seriously, I don't know. But that would also take.
I would love to see those Marauders.
Yeah. And again, for the movies at least, there is the only. I know it sounds crazy. We're sort of moving back to the movies again, but the only silver lining for me that the movies have right now is, and this may hurt some people, is the fact that Hugh Jackman's moving on. That he's not going to be there. So we'll see. That's enough of a shakeup to for them to maybe go back to the books and see what was really there and what role did Wolverine actually play. I don't know. Anywho, who knows? And again, for me, maybe there's an opportunity there finally for a Storm character to really step up, a real Oro to actually fucking be the character she was in the comics. And I want to jump over to this now, which is what we'd already sort of teased, which is the again, diversities, whatever you feel about that word. I don't understand why people think it's a bad word now. I think it's ridiculous. It's a perfectly fine word. There was a diverse cast.
It's just used really wrong a lot. It's still a beautiful word.
Exactly.
You have to watch how you conjugate.
How you conjugate that shit. Yeah, no, totally. But the fact that Storm becomes the main character of that book for so long, and becomes the leader of the X-Men. The fact that you have Cyclops, a depowered Storm, again, spoilers for people, whatever, depowered Storm, an out of control Cyclops who decide they're gonna fight for the leadership of the X-Men. This African woman fighting this white dude for control of the X-Men, and then the white dude gets beaten in issue 201 because he can't control himself. Right? Is there a better metaphor in the world? Like, I mean, is there like a depowered African woman telling the white dude, you're out of control, dude, and you gotta go get your shit together. Yeah, and again, it's not like
let's go
ahead, no.
And let's not start any fires. Storm is literally an African woman. She is an African woman. just in case we're not playing. I applaud the precise terminology there. We're not playing fast and loose with our categories here.
Absolutely.
And yes, that issue deeper than we knew at the time, more relevant than we knew at the time. And also, how the hell did Storm win? We're still boggling after that because Cyclops has all those powers. Still boggling after that. I didn't think she was going to win.
I did not.
But anyway, by the way, at one point Storm lost her powers and was just an awesome black lady with a cool haircut.
Yes.
Some people don't know that. She doesn't always have her powers.
Yeah.
But she still kicked ass. It was remarkable.
Yeah.
That's the other. Well, anyway. Gosh, we could just go on the X-Men first. The metaphor of powerlessness versus being empowered is really a rich one. Sometimes they lose their powers, and you're like, oh shit, am I a person still? And usually they find out a way that they are still a person. They're still a useful member of the team, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of stories like that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And frickin' Wolverine losing his skeleton, that whole thing. Oh my god.
Yeah, no, it's a constant. It's a constant.
But seriously, we take it really seriously.
Yeah, and because that's the thing, though. It's asking us to take it seriously, and this is the thing that I think a lot of starting to segue a little bit into creation now, a little bit, but like that's what a lot of creators are afraid to do a lot of the times, is to fucking step up to the plate and say, no, you fucking take me seriously, because I'm taking this material seriously, and to not, and I only respect creators that do that. I should rephrase that. I only have respect for creators that do that, right? No matter what their message is or what their content is. Like, if you step up to the plate and you ask me to come meet you halfway, and then you take your shit seriously, I'll be there, man. I'll fucking say yes. I may hate your content, I may despise your message, but I have nothing but respect for people who do that. And again, I think I learned this from Claremont's run on the X-Men. It demanded to be taken seriously.
Yeah, totally. I may try to cross post to Yum Yum If. Okay. So I'll go for the Asian part here and segue out of another person who's very interesting is Psylocke. Everyone likes Psylocke. Another woman of color who's on the X-Men. And if you like the fact that Psylocke is a part Japanese woman, it's because Chris Claremont did that. Again, this was loopy. I went and reread these to the Jim Lee run where Psylocke does that. You're familiar with this story, right?
Yeah, I read through this. I read through when Psylocke was introduced. Yeah.
It's been a while. It's so wacky. But anyway, to essentialize, Psylocke used to be this British chick, a pretty prissy British gal. Maybe she wasn't that popular a character. And somehow Claremont decides, well, we'll have this storyline involving the Mandarin and the Hand. And they get over to Hong Kong somehow. And for some reason, they convert her into a partially Japanese or, somehow ethnically Japanese woman who also wears a scanty ninja outfit and also suddenly has major ninja skills, in addition to being Psylocke. And now that's like canon Psylocke. If you'll look at my stuff on UMMF, I rant about this all the time. No one does original Psylocke. No one does old Psylocke. No one remembers that she was British. In the movie, they don't care. She's British from the jump, or she's Japanese from the jump. And it's just... But they didn't go and find an Asian character. They fucking took one of their their core characters and turned her into a Japanese person. That's apeshit, and it worked.
Yeah.
I mean, that's some genre crazy shit right there, and Chris Claremont did that. And he pulled it off. It could have been wrong in so many ways. But in fact, it turned Psylocke into a much more popular character who we see in the movie, who everyone knows now. I think that's freaking amazing. And by the way, that storyline has all sorts of other legit details. Like the whole X-Men team goes over to Hong Kong. There's like a pretty delightful bit where Jubilee has never been to Hong Kong before because she's an American-born Chinese girl, and she has an exchange with the locals who's like, what are you, a banana or something? Or, I don't speak a language. And all that very real Asian American stuff right there. So, again, part of the inclusion is Claremont wrote a lot of stories involving Japan, involving ninjas and samurais and stuff. And they involve ninjas because it's a comic book, not because Japan is full of ninjas. Right? And all these stories made you feel included as an Asian person because they weren't like ornamental, silly stereotypes. They were part of what was really going on. Wolverine had a really serious mission to do in Japan, or whatever it was. So you just felt warm that it branched out to all these different cultural areas. Before ninjas were like a real big cliche, even in comics. He might have started that too.
Yeah, he might have.
In fact, yeah, I think the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were, half based on some of the tropes that came out in the Claremont X-Men. So,
100%.
And so, yeah, summing up, if you like Japanese Psylocke, it's because Chris Claremont did that, and somehow made it work.
Yeah, took a character named Betsy Braddock, who, if I'm not mistaken, is the sister of Captain Britain. Am I nuts? Or is that a different character?
She sure is.
Yeah, right.
No, she was.
Well, that's what I
kind of.
Right.
She was.
Yeah.
She is.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good question now. I don't know how they handle
It's
that.
It's a very loopy comic. I mean, the exact issue where they transform
it's weird.
Betsy into new Betsy, it's nuts. And the art by Jim Lee is beautiful. Okay.
Yeah. There you go. I remember when Betsy shows up and because I love what you just pointed out there. Like everybody remembers Psylocke in the sort of skimpy ninja outfit, but when she shows up in the book, she's got this crazy head of like almost like a mane of hair, and she's in pink parachute pants, and like this. If I remember right, like the sleeves go down to here, and then she's got like sheer sleeves that connect to her wrist. She's just like the ultimate girl. It's like they were like, it seems like they sat down and they're like, all right, how girly can we make this girl? And that's what they did. And then
she looks like a mutant yoga teacher, kind of. Yeah.
Totally.
Like not their best costume.
Not their best costume, but it feels almost intentional for what they flipped her into. It almost feels. I mean, that had to be a decision, right?
Yeah, that would take a deep dive into Psylocke history, but I'll bet you're right.
I don't know, but anyway, if anybody in the listening or viewing world wants to go back to the comic where Betsy's introduced, I think it's around the Malice storyline, if I remember right. But anyway, it doesn't matter. She's in this. She's literally in like what looks like pink taffeta. It's crazy pants. But so great. I mean, and it was always interesting to me that for whatever reason, Sunfire got written out so early. But the reason, his reasoning was great. That was the other thing, which was nice, was like, even though Sunfire takes off by issue, I think it's 95 or 96, he's like, no, fuck you. I've got to go back to Japan and do my thing for my country. I got to do my thing there. We're still recovering from World War II. Things are still kind of crazy over there. And so he declines membership. Like, name another superhero book where from literally issue 2 the writers got the balls to be like, nope, this guy's going to say no.
Right.
And it's just, I don't know, I just find that ballsy and cool.
It's great, and it's dramatically important for that thing we were talking about, the going out and rounding up the gang thing. We only see why that's interesting if someone says no.
Yep.
And little kid can't imagine it. Why wouldn't you want to be part of X-Men? That makes no sense. But as you gain an adult understanding, you're like, yeah, okay, some people have to stay at home and take care of their shit. And Sunfire would be the guy who did that. And yeah, it's regrettable. Sunfire is a wonderful Asian character, probably the most powerful Asian superhero in the Marvel universe. And he doesn't come up that much, but I think he will one of these days.
Yeah,
he hangs out with the X-Men a lot. You know, he's no shortage of stories about Sunfire, but thanks. So, yeah.
No. And I want to segue a little bit. I think maybe we're getting on here, but I want to segue a little bit more also over to, you mentioned influences that sort of happened, and I can't be the only person who's ever said this, but I don't hear it enough. Joss Whedon's Avengers is the fucking Claremont X-Men. Like, there's just the theme of the first Avengers movie. He takes the Avengers and he turns them into misguided misfits. He literally uses the word misfits in the second movie, if I remember correctly. They're dysfunctional. They are there's a bunch of people looking for the daddy role, and it's amazing how. And this can't be a mistake, because when Whedon took over his run on the X-Men, which is one of the only modern X-Men stories more recent X-Men stories I bothered to read, he was just clearly just redoing Claremont's X-Men anyway, in a good way and with his Whedon-y twists, and that was great. But when the Astonishing X-Men dropped, and then the first Avengers movie dropped under Whedon's auspices, like, the connective tissue is so obvious to me. That you people out there in film land, if you love the Avengers and you haven't read these X-Men books, you're going to find a lot of motherfucking similarities in terms of theme and story and the way the characters interact. It was just, I was blown away at the end of the Avengers how much it was similar. And I liked it, and that's probably why I like those movies over the freaking actual X-Men movies, which is sacrilege to me.
Yeah, totally. No, totally. Well, because Joss Whedon gets that thing. He gets that thing. And he probably gets it because he's an X-Men fan too. That's one of the reasons he gets that model, the outsiders coming together thing. And yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's the Avengers comics were sometimes weak on their concept, their collective concept, and their familial relations. So just take a little bit of X-Men and get into the Avengers, and you've got a great organizing premise for a movie, right? And I'll just clap to indicate that happened. Okay, I'm moving on.
Cool. So, I don't know. Let's call this segment the X-Men relatives, shall we? So I'm gonna let's kick a few things back and forth. Who else do you think is an X-Men relative? I'm calling Whedon's Avengers run X-Men relative.
Oh well, I'll say it again. Wild Cards, which people aren't so familiar with right now, but they're going to be because it's edited by George R. R. Martin, who does Game of Thrones, and that's massive. And they're going to turn his other series, Wild Cards, into a science fiction TV series. And they're the same tribe as us. They know all the X-Men stuff. They wrote all the comics. So it's a cousin in the sense that in this novel series and in the TV series, which will exist at some point, there are aces and jokers. Aces have superheroes. Aces have superpowers. Jokers are mutated freaks. It's because they all have the same thing. They all have the same virus. The aces just happen to be the beautiful freaks. They lucked out because their freak card became beautiful and empowering and enables them to have fame and fortune or do whatever. Some people didn't luck out, and they have an elephant nose growing out of their face. and something else that's less cute than that. But you know what I mean? Right. They're made of snot or something.
Right.
So that's a clear cousin of the X-Men. Yeah. And they play that out through New York City and all the way that plays into people who are,
the people like Jean Grey, who is a mutant, but she's a perfectly acceptable human in every possible way.
Yes, every possible way.
And then they're like Beast,
right?
And who will not be accepted, but they're cousins anyway. So that's
and also there's obviously
I'm very excited about this one.
You're very excited about the what?
I'm very excited about this wild cards thing because, like the X-Men thing, it's a huge thing that could be great and probably won't be. So, but you never know.
You never know. Yeah, you never know. Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, again, sort of, I'll cheat again. For me, another one is just the way Joss Whedon put together sort of the Scooby team and the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV show as well is very. It's got a very X-Men-y vibe and flavor to it to me. The way they interact. Everybody's got a skill. Blah blah blah. And there's a depowered one, right? Like Xander is the depowered X-Men of that group, right? Willow has a skill. Eventually, Willow becomes a superhero as well. Everybody who gets pulled into that group has a very specific skill set, except for Xander, who is the depowered one who gets to comment on everything. Very X-Men-y.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. I never read the new Teen Titans thing over at DC. Did you ever dig into that? Because some people say that was.
Yeah, I'm not hip enough to know about the newest new Teen Titans.
Oh, okay.
I know about the Teen Titans from the 80s and 90s, and they're all freaking middle-aged with kids now. But I'm not even gonna go into that.
Fair enough.
But yeah, is there a connection there?
Yeah, I don't know. I just I've heard other people mention that since when the X-Men were doing their thing, that that sort of traveled over to the DC, and that's where they decided to. DC tried to sort of work out some of those ideas inside that book, and I never read any of the Teen Titans stuff in the 80s. I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. I can see that as a possibility, and that would probably save some DC movies if they got that element in there. They definitely played the Teen Titans definitely played that card. They were weird and more fringy than the Justice League, certainly.
Okay.
So they had some issues.
Yeah. Issues. I got that. Issues. Well,
let's have a segment of the show that's just called Issues. Can we do that?
Oh, we can.
We're always going to have them. It completely relates to almost everything we're going to talk about.
Issues. Let's do that. Let's talk about issues. How can we talk about issues with this? I assume we're talking about like deeper.
And somehow we also have to talk about Frank Miller. Anyway.
Oh shit. You know what? Can we do this? Let's do a Miller only cast because I think we can really crack into some shit there. The things that.
Oh yeah. No, I was proposing perhaps for next time.
That's a very good idea. All
for
right.
Future.
For future. All right. But for issues, I like this idea for issues.
Yeah, we have issues with Miller. We have issues with a lot of things.
Yes, absolutely.
Sometimes they're lovely issues.
Sometimes they're good issues. Sometimes they're bad. But let's chase this down for a second in terms of issues with the X-Men, with Claremont or the X-Men in general. So, I mean, again, I think my obvious issue, and this one is not social and related, and I think eventually we can get into real issues. It's just obviously what happened with Wolverine becoming overused and just becoming a little too defined and showing up everywhere. It literally de-energized me from reading the books. It really just like when I ended up going to university and went to a theater school and didn't have money and all that kind of stuff. So there was a reason to sort of leave my comic book addiction behind there anyway. But I felt fine leaving because Claremont was gone. Wolverine, and at the time it was this weird triumvirate of the Punisher, Wolverine, and fucking nobody remembers this, Ghost Rider appearing in every goddamn comic book that they could shove them into in order to increase sales, and it stops passing the smell test, around 1991, 92, and then like I said, that just happened to coincide when I went to college, when I went to university, so I felt good. I felt like I had gotten pretty much everything I was going to get from the X-Men run at the time, and I kind of walked away. And I felt that they had introduced Gambit as a new stranger archetype, and for whatever reason, I didn't connect with that character at all. I thought he was a bit of a blatant refill, trying to take the place of what Wolverine used to be. I mean, he literally shows up out of nowhere. Because the X-Men go through the Siege Perilous and Storm has this new origin story, and he's literally just dropped in fully formed out of nowhere, which is, I shouldn't complain because it's a common X-Men trope, but for some reason with Gambit it just bugged the shit out of me. And they were using one of my favorite characters as just like this I don't know, like a chip that they could turn in for selling issues. So when I walked away, that was my issue. I was just like, okay, well, you're using that character, and what I love is a cash cow. Peace. And I left, and so I obviously missed some very key shit. I missed the Jim Lee stuff. Like I missed all of the Cable stuff. I missed all of the Bishop stuff. I missed all of the resolution of the Sinister. Not Apocalypse. I always call him Apocalypse. Fuck, is that his name? Apocalypse. Yeah, I get Apocalypse and Darkseid mixed up.
There's Sinister and Apocalypse, and
yeah, I missed the sort of wind down of the Sinister Apocalypse entanglement and all of that stuff. The whole Cable storyline, I just missed, and even when I tried to dip back into it, it just didn't ring the same bells for me. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Jim Lee's an amazing artist. I'm not sure I never grokked his writing, or the plotting that happened around, was that Scott Lobdell who took over or whatever. It just wasn't something.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. Just didn't ring for me. So that was my issue. It just became like this weird cash cow thing.
Yeah, and I think that history will bear that out. I think the X-Men were blowing up, and they were doing a lot of different tricks. They started the thing of having 11 million X-Men comics. Still the best-selling comic of all time was X-Men 1.
That's right.
The third version or fourth version or whatever.
Yeah.
Image was happening. A lot of things were happening. So it makes total sense, and that's what you just said. And I guess my arc would be similar too. And then, so yes, double on what you said. And then you meet these people who were following the X-Men during your non-following X-Men period. And the Psylocke people, the hardcore Jubilee people, the people who actually know where Gambit comes from and what he did, even though I'm only vaguely familiar with that shit. And that's awesome. That's just what's so great about it. You can, it's one through line, and yet you can come in on all these different angles at all these different periods, and it's all part of one piece. And also, nothing really matters because people in the X-Men die and come back to life, so it doesn't really matter anything. I mean, as far as continuity, there's no wrong.
Right. Yes, right, exactly.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, and that was, and that's an interesting issue that, once talk about 11 million, the 11 million Jean Grey storylines that they're bringing back of that character, even though I really appreciated at the time the Madeline Pryor sort of storyline, meaning there was this crazy divorce thing going on there where Madeline Pryor and Cyclops were trying to work out what their relationship actually was or meant, and it was this deeply dysfunctional Scott being a dick most of the time, seriously weird setup that even though it was deeply complex, just in terms of the relationship level, and then since they were bringing Jean Grey back, at least they ended up using Madeline Pryor in an interesting way in the Inferno crossover, even though that crossover was not my favorite. At least she got a role to fulfill before they phased her out. You know what I mean? Again, it was some good storytelling going on there.
That was a kind of a bummer. It was like a marriage on the decline. And the subjects of because she's a demon or ends up being a demon, we don't know about that one. But anyway,
yes,
it was a bummer. Madeline Pryor.
Totally.
Anyway,
bummer. So that's our.
I've never been married. I don't know if I can speak to the whole thing.
Yeah. No worries. All right. Well, it looks like those are our issues with that. Well, great. I think we're pretty much good on this. Do you have any final thoughts on Claremont's run on the Uncanny X-Men?
I'm gonna go back and reread that. I didn't finish the whole Psylocke storyline. It takes 3 or 4 issues. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna go back with my handy iPad app and really do a close read on them. So because it's fascinating, as I said, it's as fascinating as the films should be.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, and again, for me, the only thing I didn't mention was just another very seminal story that happened. This was back when graphic novel wasn't a term that was thrown around much. Marvel started a graphic novel line in, I think it was 80 or 81. And the fifth one was an X-Men one written by Chris Claremont and drawn by a guy who I've never seen again called Brent Eric Anderson. And that was God Loves, Man Kills. And it was the X-Men taken even darker, which I really appreciated at the time. And again, very much wears its metaphors on its sleeve that the X-Men, really exploring Magneto's Jewish past and just, again, this sort of, there's the Marauder, and I guess it's sort of, again, it's prescient for the Marauders. The Marauders wouldn't show up, I think, for another year or two, and in Claremont's run, there's a group of people running around just exterminating mutants, just murdering them straight up. The book opens up with the straight up murder of a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old African American pair of kids in a playground. It's brutal as fuck. I happen to have a copy here, so I don't know if you haven't checked it out. It's also hey man,
I haven't seen that in a while.
Yeah, exactly. Great. And it's just, it's so dark. Even the back cover image is just, it's a dead small child with the fucking hung up on a swing with the word mutie written across it. It's super intense, and just a bold, again, for its time period, just a bold step forward. So just encourage people, if you haven't checked that storyline. I don't even know how you get it these days. I'm sure it's available somewhere, somehow. But check that shit out. So cool. So lastly, guys, the way we're always going to wind up these podcasts is just a reminder that Dom and I are, we're thrilled to have you, and Dom and I are always thrilled to geek out over whatever subject we can get our freaking little hands on. But the other thing is that we are artists, and we are content creators, and we want to let you guys know about what we're doing, what we're up to. Again, I'm gonna throw it over to Dom to talk about what he's got going on now, and of course, anything we talk about here will be linked in the show notes and all that good stuff, so that you know what we're up to creating. Dom?
Thanks, Chris. Well, I was thinking a lot about the X-Men this week because my YouTube channel, karaokerhapsody.com, like Bohemian Rhapsody, but Karaoke Rhapsody, just goes to my YouTube channel. We're doing cosplay karaoke, and I've done a couple of videos. We have Mystique singing a version of Radiohead's Creep, but I'm Mystique, which I think is kind of awesome. It's got some X-Men singing Born This Way, mainly villains, not and also has Black Queen Celine from the Hellfire Club. Anyway, this is why the X-Men were particularly prominent here. Go to karaokerhapsody.com, please, or just look up cosplay karaoke. We need subscribers, views, all that kind of stuff. It would be lovely, and it's fun. It's not as wrenching as the Mutant Massacre or God Loves Man Kill. I'll tell you that. It's some X people singing songs. Excellent. And also, if you want to look, I'll probably post some version of this over at Yum Yum F. I'm maintaining the coverage of genre stuff, nerd stuff, superhero stuff over there. YumYumF.com, or just find Dominic Ma and write another nerdy word next to it and search for it, and I'll probably come.
Great. Very cool. The thing I'm mostly working on these days is I've got a feature film coming up, what we'd call an elevated genre feature film that I'm shooting in Brussels in January, that I'll keep you guys sort of updated about, and all that stuff, without teasing too much about what that is and I'll sort of just be telling you about that process and where we are in that. And we're good. We've got our base funding, and we've got a budget to go for that funding. So we're good. We're actually a go project. We're of course always raising a little more just to make things a little bit easier. Eventually there'll be a Kickstarter campaign and all that good garbage as well. So that project is called Joanne, and I'll just keep talking about that as this wonderful little podcast unfolds. For now, that's all I'll say about it, and I'll keep dropping, letting you guys know where I'm at with that. Cool.
Very thrilling.
It is.
Astonishing and
it's astonishing and maybe even uncanny. No, it's not. It's not uncanny at all. All right. Oh well, I tried to work that in and I failed miserably. Anywho, ladies and gentlemen, Thank you guys for coming and finding us, however you found us. Again, hit like if you can, subscribe wherever you want. If you want to leave us a review on iTunes, that'd be great, to increase our visibility, etc., etc. End of podcast stuff that you hear every time you listen to a podcast. Do all that stuff. We're cool. We love you. Again, I'm Christopher. That's
Dominic.
We're elevating the genre. I know. In episode 0, I swear I wasn't going to say that, but I think I'm going back on my word. I like saying it. We love you guys. Yeah. Dom?
We're both that thing and actively doing that verb. Take note of that. We are elevating the genre, and we are elevating the genre. Like, that's the thing we're doing. Okay.
Yep.
I was just sorting that out in my head.
Yep.
I think it works both ways. Yeah, so thanks very much.
Cheers, folks. Talk to you soon. Bye. Done. God loves man kills.